Bailiff, please restrain the witness. Her silent contempt for this court is palpable. The words, slick with condescension, dripped from the prosecutor's lips and pooled in the sterile air of the military courtroom. A few nervous titters rippled through the gallery, a pathetic chorus of sycophants eager to align with the man in charge. Captain Davis, the prosecutor, preened under the attention, his chest puffing out. He had made his point. He had established dominance. The witness, a woman so unremarkable she seemed to blend into the polished wood of the stand, offered no reaction. Her face remained a placid mask, her posture relaxed but perfectly aligned, a study in unnerving stillness. She didn't argue. She didn't protest. She simply turned her head slightly, her gaze meeting the approaching bailiffs with a calm that bordered on hypnotic. She extended her wrists, palms up, an offering. It was not an act of surrender, but one of serene, procedural compliance. In the back of the courtroom, seated in the last row reserved for senior staff, a four-star admiral leaned forward almost imperceptibly. He had come to observe the trial of a young sailor from one of his former commands, but his attention was now riveted on the woman in the witness box. It wasn't her unassuming appearance that caught his eye, nor the prosecutor's pompous display. It was the way she stood. It was the perfect economy of motion as she presented her wrists. It was a posture he hadn't seen in years, a specific kind of readiness taught in only one place, to a handful of individuals. A place where silence was the primary language. A ghost of a memory flickered in his mind, and he knew, with chilling certainty, that this courtroom was about to learn a lesson it would never forget. If you believe that true strength is proven not with words, but with unwavering competence, type respect in the comments below. The setting was JAG Courtroom 3B at Naval Station Norfolk, a place where careers were made and broken under the cold, impartial glare of fluorescent lights. On trial was Petty Officer Second Class Miller, a young electronics technician accused of dereliction of duty during a vessel boarding exercise that went wrong. The charges felt flimsy, politically motivated to cover for an officer's poor planning, and the defense's case hinged on a single, crucial witness. That witness was now being cuffed. Her name, according to the heavily redacted file on Captain Davis's desk, was Anya Sharma. A civilian consultant, the file suggested, with some vague maritime security experience. Davis saw a small woman in a simple gray blouse and dark slacks, her hair pulled back in a severe bun. She looked like a librarian, or perhaps an administrative assistant. He had decided from the moment he saw her that she was an easy target, someone to be dismantled on the stand to prove a point. His assault had been immediate and brutal. He questioned her credentials, which she was not at liberty to discuss. He mocked her presence, implying she was merely a friend of the accused, driven by misplaced loyalty. "Miss Sharma," he had sneered, "are we to believe that you, with your limited background, possess a clearer tactical picture than the decorated officers on that vessel?" Her only reply had been a quiet, "I saw what I saw." This infuriating calm, this refusal to be baited, was what drove Davis to escalate. He accused her of contempt, and the weary judge, eager to move the proceedings along, had foolishly agreed. The metallic click of the handcuffs locking around her slender wrists echoed the gavel's finality. For Davis, it was victory. As the two bailiffs, both large men accustomed to handling unruly sailors, moved to restrain her, something gave them pause. It was not resistance. It was the opposite. Anya Sharma rose from her chair in a single, fluid motion, a seamless transfer of weight that spoke of thousands of hours of practiced discipline. There was no wasted energy, no hesitation. She turned to face them, her body positioned at a perfect angle, offering the clearest and safest access to her wrists while maintaining absolute balance. Her hands were open, fingers slightly curled, a picture of non-aggression that was somehow more intimidating than a clenched fist. Her eyes, a deep and steady brown, met theirs without a flicker of fear or anger. She was not a person being arrested. She was an expert participating in a procedure, and she was doing it more professionally than they were. The first bailiff reached for his cuffs, his own movements suddenly feeling clumsy and brutish in comparison to her surgical precision. He fumbled for a moment, unnerved by her utter lack of emotional response. The cold steel made contact with her skin. Click. The second cuff followed. Click. The sound was sharp, definitive, yet it felt hollow in the profound silence that had fallen over the room. It was the silence of a packed arena after a gymnast lands a perfect routine. It was the silence of a firing range in a microsecond after a flawless shot. In that moment of manufactured humiliation, Anya Sharma demonstrated her true nature not through an act of violence, but through the terrifying perfection of her compliance. Her competence was so ingrained it was present even in the act of being shackled. Captain Davis allowed himself a small, triumphant smile. He had done it. He had taken the defense's star witness and turned her into a criminal in the eyes of the court. The jury would see her not as an expert, but as a disruptive element. Her credibility shattered. "Let the record show," he announced, his voice booming with false gravitas, "that the witness has been declared hostile and is now properly restrained." He glanced at the jury, then at the judge, soaking in his perceived victory. The young sailor, Petty Officer Miller, slumped in his chair, his face a mask of utter despair. The one person who could have testified to his courage, who knew the truth of that chaotic moment on the high seas, was now shackled like a common felon. His defense attorney looked defeated, shuffling papers with no real purpose. The air in the courtroom was thick with the smug satisfaction of the prosecution and the suffocating hopelessness of the defense. Davis felt emboldened, his ego swelling. He decided to press his advantage, to solidify his standing in front of the high-ranking officer in the gallery. He made a fatal error in judgment, a miscalculation born of pure arrogance. Turning his gaze toward the back of the room, he gave a slight, deferential nod to the decorated Admiral. "As the Admiral can see," Davis projected, seeking validation from the highest authority present, "we run a tight ship in this courtroom. We do not tolerate disrespect for the uniform or this institution." The Admiral's face remained a stony mask, his eyes not on Davis, but fixed, with an unnerving intensity, on the woman in handcuffs. Admiral Vance did not acknowledge the prosecutor's sycophantic remark. To him, Captain Davis had ceased to exist. All the air, all the focus, all the history in that room had converged on the small, silent woman in the witness stand. The Admiral rose to his full height, the 4 silver stars on his collar catching the light like distant, cold constellations. Every person in the room, the judge, the jury, the bailiffs, the gallery, went rigid. Their breath caught in their throats. The presence of a full admiral at a low-level court-martial was unheard of. His intervention was unimaginable. He began to walk forward, his polished black shoes making no sound on the tiled floor, a testament to a lifetime of moving with purpose. He bypassed the prosecution's table without a glance. He walked past the judge's bench as if it were a piece of furniture. He stopped directly in front of the witness stand, his presence casting a sudden shadow over the proceedings. He looked down at the gleaming steel cuffs biting into Anya Sharma's wrists. Then he looked up, meeting her calm, unwavering gaze. For a brief, electric moment, a silent conversation passed between them, a shared hardship, a profound and earned respect that transcended rank and circumstance. Then, the Admiral turned his head slowly, his piercing blue eyes landing on the judge, who now looked as if he'd swallowed a block of ice. "Your Honor." Admiral Vance's voice was low, but it resonated with the unmistakable authority of a man who had commanded carrier strike groups, a voice that carried across the flight decks and into the far corners of the world. "I believe there has been a grave and, frankly, embarrassing misunderstanding here today." "Clerk," the Admiral commanded, his voice leaving no room for debate. "Bring me the witness's complete, unredacted service record." "Level 7 clearance." The judge, now pale and sweating profusely under his black robes, flinched as if struck. Level 7 was a classification reserved for the most sensitive and compartmentalized intelligence in the entire Department of the Navy. He stammered, "Immediately, Admiral." Of course, a clerk scurried away and returned moments later with a single, slender file marked with ominous red stripes. He handed it to the Admiral with a trembling hand. But Admiral Vance didn't open it. He didn't need to. He knew its contents by heart. He held the file in one hand and turned to address the stunned, silent courtroom. "This court," he began, his voice a low growl of controlled fury, "has spent the last hour attempting to discredit, humiliate, and now restrain Lieutenant Commander Anya Sharma." He emphasized her rank. A collective gasp sucked the remaining air out of the room. "Lieutenant Commander." Davis's face went from smug to ashen. "For those of you unfamiliar with her work, and you should be, because her work requires her to remain in the shadows, allow me to provide some context." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Unit, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, silence. Call sign, Shanti." A few of the older career sailors in the gallery shifted, their eyes widening in dawning horror. They knew the name. It was a ghost story, a legend whispered on deployment. Combat deployments, 17. Confirmed engagements, classified. Longest successful cold bore shot, 2,740 meters, a world record she holds under a different name. Recipient of the Navy Cross, he let that hang in the air. Then he delivered the final, devastating blow. And a second Navy Cross, awarded for actions taken during Operation Silent Anvil. An operation where she single-handedly held off a numerically superior enemy force for 72 hours, neutralizing 17 hostiles to protect the extraction of her wounded team. A team that included a young, terrified, but exceptionally brave petty officer named Miller. The courtroom was no longer silent. It was stunned into a state of reverent paralysis. The air itself seemed to have frozen, thick with the magnitude of the Admiral's revelation. The smug smirks that had littered the faces in the gallery had evaporated, replaced by gaping mouths and wide, shame-filled eyes. Captain Davis looked as though he had been physically struck, his arrogance collapsing inward like a dying star. His case, his career, his entire sense of self-worth had been vaporized in less than a minute. The judge, his face a blotchy red, slammed his gavel down with a crack that made everyone jump. Bailiffs, remove those restraints. Immediately, his voice was a choked, panicked squeak. My deepest apologies, Lieutenant Commander. This court was not aware. The bailiff who had so confidently cuffed her now fumbled with the key, his thick fingers trembling as if he were trying to disarm a bomb. He couldn't meet her eyes. The metallic click of the cuffs falling open was not just a release, it was a reversal. It was the sound of justice reasserting itself, of truth shattering a carefully constructed lie. Anya Sharma simply and methodically rubbed her wrists, her expression as placid as ever. There was no triumph in her eyes. No, I told you so. She turned her head, her gaze finding Petty Officer Miller. She gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a small gesture, but for the young sailor, it was a lifeline. It was vindication. It was everything. The story didn't just leave the courtroom, it detonated. Before the judge had even officially dismissed the proceedings, texts were flying, whispers were racing through the corridors of Naval Station Norfolk, and phone calls were being made in hushed, awestruck tones. The legend of Shanti, the ghost sniper of Devgru, being cuffed in a JAG courtroom by a pompous prosecutor, had achieved mythic status in minutes. It became the ultimate cautionary tale of judging a book by its cover. For Captain Davis, the fallout was swift and brutal. He was summoned to Admiral Vance's office. The heavy oak door closed, and for one long, silent hour, his fate was sealed. He emerged a changed man, his swagger gone, replaced by the hollowed-out look of someone who had stared into the abyss of his own professional ruin. 2 days later, his transfer orders came through, a staff JAG position in Adak, Alaska. It wasn't just a reassignment. It was a career execution, a slow freeze known colloquially as being sent to the ice. On his last day, he found Lieutenant Commander Sharma at a small arms range, quietly mentoring a group of new recruits on breathing techniques. He approached her, his head bowed. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. "I wanted to apologize. There's no excuse for my conduct." Sharma paused her instruction and looked at him. There was no anger, no satisfaction, only the cool, analytical assessment of a professional. "Assumptions are a liability, Captain," she said, her voice even and low. "They get people killed on the battlefield, and they get careers killed in a courtroom." Remember that it was the most she had said to him, and it was a lesson burned into his soul. 6 months later, the ripples of that day continued to spread. The case against Petty Officer Miller was unceremoniously dropped, all charges expunged from his record. Based on Lieutenant Commander Sharma's now unimpeachable testimony, submitted quietly and in writing, Miller was awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal with a V for valor for his clear-headed courage under fire. His career was saved, his honor restored. In the halls of the Naval Justice School, the incident in Courtroom 3B became required curriculum. A case study not in law, but in humility. First-year prosecutors were told the story as a stark warning against the lethal combination of arrogance and ignorance. The phrase, "Don't Davis the witness," entered the JAG Corps lexicon, a potent shorthand for doing your homework, checking your ego, and never, ever underestimating who is sitting in the witness box. As for Anya Sharma, she was gone. Not from the Navy, but back into the shadows where she belonged. She never spoke of the incident. She didn't have to. The story itself became her advocate, a silent, powerful testament to her character. It served as a reminder throughout the fleet that the most formidable warriors are often the ones you see least, the ones who let their actions speak with a thunderous finality that no boastful words could ever match. The legend of the day the Navy cuffed its own ghost became a permanent part of its institutional memory, a story told to remind everyone that respect is earned in silence and proven under pressure. True strength is not found in the volume of your voice, but in the unassailable precision of your actions. It is not measured by the ignorant assumptions of others, but by the quiet, profound respect earned from those who have witnessed the truth of your capabilities. Legacy isn't a metal pinned to a uniform or a name listed in a file. It is the unwavering standard you set, a silent benchmark that continues to inspire competence and shame arrogance long after you have moved on to the next mission. It is the story of a cuffed warrior who, without raising her voice or showing a flicker of emotion, reminded an entire institution that the most dangerous weapon is often the one you never see coming, wrapped in a package of quiet, unassuming professionalism. Her calm became a roar. Her silence became a verdict. And the click of her handcuffs opening became a symbol of a timeless truth. That true worth needs no announcement, for it will always, eventually, be revealed in the light. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud prejudice, and where silent discipline defines true worth, subscribe to Unknown Heroine Tales.